welcome to week 9, where we're going to be focusing on playing bass lines through the 2-5-1 chord progressions. Take a look at the PDF document that's in the week 9 folder. It's entitled 2-5-1 Bass Lines. So here, the right-hand chords are all the same that we worked on last week, and including doing them in different inversions, just depending on the range. And here I have our 2-5-1 in C major, and those chords are happening in the two different variations we have, starting with the third on the bottom for the D minor chord, and the seventh on the bottom. So I kind of go back and forth throughout. So that's all from last week's lesson. And this week the focus is on the left hand, creating some walking bass lines. So this is certainly one of the iconic jazz swing bass lines, basically. I mean, it's one of the things that makes jazz sound like jazz. And so here the walking bass line is most basically just quarter notes. And I've written down a series of rules that are kind of, a common way that people do this. It's not about right and wrong. It's just about common practice. And so the rules, as you see, are that you start on the root of each new chord. So that kind of takes care of the downbeat. You don't have to be creative. You just play the root. You're using notes, mostly notes out of the scale and mode for each chord. That's going to be 75% of what you're doing right there is just playing the root on the downbeat and then playing other notes out of the scale and mode. And, those scales and modes we've gone over in the past, and that's basically the Dorian mode for D minor 9, that's the second mode. The Mixolydian mode for G9, that's the fifth mode. And the Ionian mode, major scale, for the C major 9. So if you noticed, I was talking about the second mode, Dorian, the fifth mode, Mixolydian, and the first mode, Ionian. That's our 2-5-1. So really, you're just using notes out of C major. You just got to start on D for the D minor and start on G for the G dominant chord. Other rules. Number 3, lead to the next chord root. So the whole point is that these bass lines are leading to the next chord. Number 4, if you have the same chord for 2 measures, so like the C major chord, we have 2 measures of that, you can play the fifth to start out the second measure, so you don't have to go back to the root. That's just a way of extending the bass line. So that takes us through that first section there. Let's see what that sounds like.
1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat. So notice my left hand fingering is not always the same. I'm doing just as I call it, just doing freestyle. There are a few rules though. I try and use as many fingers in a row as I can, and then I cross under like that. Cross thumb under to continue, or cross over like that.
Okay, so moving on, number 5 here on our PDF is about adding chromatic tones. And this is mainly done to make sure you're leading to the roots of the chords you're going to, or to just kind of fill in so that it leads to other notes out of the scale, and the voice leading leads to the next root. So if you take a look at that under number 5, that first line there, here I have the bass line going in a different direction on the D minor, going down instead of up. Then on the G9, when it comes up, I add a G sharp there to lead to the A. And really, that's just a better use of a chromatic tone than other options that I would have there, like, for example, an A sharp or a B flat, just because that's the minor third of G. And it's a G dominant chord, which has a major third, so I'm just going to avoid using the minor third to kind of confuse the tonality. So instead, I've added this other chromatic tone, and this basically is just letting me be able to, in 4 beats, lead from G to C without repeating any notes. Then on that third measure, I have an F sharp there to lead to the 5th of C. Remember that goes back to rule number 4, where you can land on the 5th scale degree. And then on the way down in that 4th measure there, I have a C sharp to kind of help with the repeat to go back to D, basically, is what I did there. The second line there under number 5 is another option. The second measure is the same, G9 is the same, but the D minor is going up, and here I've added a chromatic tone leading to the G. And this is a leading tone leading right to that G. Even though that's a major third for that D minor, it's the 4th beat, and so that's leading to the next chord, which is going to sound nice. Then coming down that C major scale, I've added another chromatic tone, which is the A flat there in the 3rd measure, 4th beat, and that's just another half step to kind of then lead to the 5th scale degree in the 4th measure. And again, I did the same thing at the end of the 4th measure, where I added the E flat to lead to the D minor.
So here's number 5, the first line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it repeats. So again, I'm going to move that bass line down an octave just because I think it'll sound better. Here it is again, number 5, 2, 3, first line. Let me try that again. I can do that better. One more time. Last time. So here's the second line under number 5. A slight variation. 2, 3, 4.
So then the last line, number 6, you can use larger intervals. It doesn't have to all be stepwise in thirds, but you can use larger intervals, and it works best to use those earlier in the measure, because remember, we want the last part of the measure to lead to the next measure. So that's a good way to do it. And in addition to that, eventually we'll be adding a rhythm to the right hand. And so I'll show you how to do that, or I'll show you what that sounds like with this example.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll do that again. Check this out. So the first time through, I'm going to play it just as is. Or let me play through just as is right now. 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to actually do some octave displacement. I'm just going to move the octave of the left hand, but only for some of it, not for the entire measure. And you can get away with this with the bass lines all the time in any context. You almost can't hear the different octave changes the lower the instrument gets. So check this out. It's still the last line here, but I'm going to go like this. So I went from this lower octave to going up a third instead of going down a sixth. And now here, I'm going to go down an octave to G instead of up an octave. And then the rest of the measure, I'm going to do exactly the same. So here it is from the beginning again. This is all just as it is. So check it out. I'll do exactly the same thing. So now I'm going to play through some 2-5-1s or a 2-5-1 in just this key again. And I'm going to play several times through, and I'm going to mix up all the different possibilities here, starting mostly with stuff from the first line, then adding things from the second line, the third line, and the fourth line more as I go. So here we go. Check it out. 2, ready, go.
So, as is usually the case, I think I probably broke every single rule that I wrote down there at some point in the bass lines I just played. These rules aren't here. It's not intended to confine you. They aren't here to tell you what to do, but this is just supposed to help you narrow down all the possibilities to kind of get to something that sounds more like the way that a bass player would play bass lines. And the reason we're working on this is that this is a great thing to be able to do to function as a chording instrument and a bass instrument at the same time, and you can accompany other musicians. If you're a singer, you can accompany yourself. If you're an instrumentalist or a singer, it's great to be able to play through tunes and play through chord progressions and hear what they sound like, both kind of a groove and a style, and mostly just the tonalities. These bass lines that I have written down here are pretty complex. It starts pretty simple and it quickly gets very complex. You can simplify it. You could take just like the first measure of the first line and do a bass line like that throughout. So if you think about it as scale degrees for D minor 9, you would have 1, 2, 3, 5. Well, you could just do 1, 2, 3, 5 for every single chord. It's not going to be a very interesting bass line, and at some point you're going to just keep going from the lower register and keep going up higher. You won't have a way to go back down with a descending bass line. But still, it's a good place to start to do something like that. You can work on these bass lines that I had. You could make your own. You could kind of combine things I have or other ideas of your own. But the most important thing that we're going to be getting at is being able to play bass lines like this more like an improvisation. Just like you improvise a melody or a jazz musician would improvise a melody, the bass lines are also improvised. We're working on them for 2-5-1s right now, or for a 2-5-1 in C major. But you're going to be playing these in um, for 2-5-1s, just one at a time. And also, you're going to be playing bass lines through the F blues, which also includes a 2-5-1 in the key of F. So start practicing these a little bit. Just like you're practicing your 2-5-1s to go through the circle, start doing that with bass lines, just doing a few at a time. You should be able to play the chords and the bass notes more easily. And in fact, you're going to be performing a quiz that you're doing exactly that, just playing the bass notes only and the chords, not the bass lines, just the root of the chord only, and the chord in the right hand all through the keys, through all 12 keys. The bass lines, just start working on them in a few keys every day, but not all of them right now. Cool. So check out the quiz that's also posted on Blackboard, and I'll see you next week.